We didn't learn the name right away. It wasn't written on a sign or marked on a map. We picked it up the way you learn anything in a place that you don't belong. By listening. By paying attention to how people spoke when they weren't thinking about being heard. The way they said it told us everything we needed to know. Hearth Hollow. At first, we didn't walk straight in. We circled the village from a distance, keeping to the tree line longer than we probably needed to. Caution had become instinct by then. You don't just walk into something unfamiliar after everything we had already been through. Not after dying. Not after waking up in a world that shouldn't exist. We expected something to be wrong. A hidden catch, walls we couldn't see at the first glance, or guards who would notice us long before we noticed them. Some kind of structure meant to keep people out. But there was nothing. No gates, no patrols, no tension hanging in the air. Just open land, worn paths, and smoke rising lazily from chimneys. And people living, moving through their day like the world made sense. Like everything was exactly as it should be. Somehow, that felt stranger than anything else we had seen. When we finally approached, we did it slowly, step by step, watching for anything that might tell us we were making a mistake. But nothing did. We slowed as we entered, and almost immediately we were noticed. Not all at once, not dramatically, just small things. A glance from someone carrying water, a pause from a man repairing a cart, a child staring a little too long before being called back. It wasn't hostile, just curious. We didn't belong, that was obvious. Two strangers walking in from the road, dressed wrong. It was enough to draw attention, but not enough to cause alarm. "We're travelers," my friend said when someone finally asked. It came out naturally, like we had already decided that was the truth. And in a way, it was. "From the far west." There was a brief pause. A few people exchanged glances. Not suspicious, just measuring. An older man scratched at his beard as he studied us a moment longer than the others. "That's a long way," he said. We nodded and didn't elaborate. We didn't need to. And just like that, it was accepted. Not fully believed, but accepted enough. We were strangers, and in a place like this, that was explanation enough. The tavern sat near the center of the village, solid and well used. It wasn't built to impress, just to last. Inside, it smelled like wood smoke, cooked meat, and something faintly sweet. It was warm in that way that felt almost overwhelming after everything we had been through. The first night didn't feel real. We had a room above the tavern, a real bed, not the ground, not cold, not uncertain, just a bed. The food was warm, filling, and tasted like it had been made by someone who understood what hunger really meant. We ate slowly, almost carefully, like it might disappear if we rushed it. We didn't talk much, not because we had nothing to say, but because saying it out loud might have made it real. After everything that had happened, this felt too normal and too easy. "This doesn't feel right," he said quietly at one point. "I know," I replied without looking up. Because it didn't. We had died. Now we were sitting at a wooden table, eating stew like nothing had happened. Sleep came easier than expected. Exhaustion doesn't care about logic. It doesn't question reality, it just takes over. The next morning came with sound. Not loud, but constant. The quiet rhythm of a place already in motion. Tools, voices, footsteps, work. We stayed because we didn't have a plan, and because leaving immediately felt wrong. If this was a new and different world, we needed to understand it, at least a little. Work came naturally, not offered directly, just available. You see someone carrying too much, you help. You notice something broken and you fix it. Stay useful long enough, and people stop asking why you're there. We carried sacks of grains from one end of the village to the other, repaired fences worn down by time and weather, cleared brush near the edge of the forest where it pressed a little too close for comfort. That part felt different. The trees weren't wrong, not exactly, but the way they grew too tight in some places, too empty in others, just felt unnatural, like something had shaped them or held them back. The day settled into a rhythm. Wait, work, eat, listen, and repeat. And through it all, something became clear. We were different, but not in a bad way. How we looked, in how we moved, and how we reacted. My body understood things before I consciously thought about them. Weight, balance, force. Swinging an axe didn't feel like learning. It felt like remembering. The first time I split a log clean in a single strike, I stopped and stared at it longer than I should have, because I knew I shouldn't be able to do that. Not yet. The village smith noticed. At first he just watched me, and said nothing. Then one day he waved me over without explanation and pointed at a pile of coal. "Carry that." I did. The next day he handed me a piece of metal and told me to hold it steady. It was hot. Hot enough that I should have reacted, but I didn't. Eventually he handed me a hammer. The weight felt right in my hands. Not new, but familiar. Like picking up something I had once put down a long time ago. I struck wrong at first, too careful and too controlled. He didn't correct me, just watched. The second strike was better, and the third was clean. Something clicked. Not fully, not completely, but enough. The movement came natural, the rhythm followed. Heat, strike, turn, and strike again. "You've done this before," he said one afternoon. I just shook my head. "No, I haven't." But even as I said that, it didn't feel like the truth. He didn't argue, just nodded, like he didn't need an answer. After that, he let me stay. Not officially, but close enough. I learned, or rather, I remembered. It was hard to tell the difference. How metal moved under the heat, how timing mattered more than strength, how patience shaped more than force ever could. By the fourth day, I wasn't just helping, I was making things. Small things, but real and useful. My friend adapted in his own way. Where I worked, he observed. Where I used strength, he used time. The chapel became his place. It was small and quiet, filled with worn books that smelled like dust and age. Histories, maps, fragments of knowledge pieced together over time. He spent hours there, sometimes entire days, reading, comparing, thinking. At night we sat together under lantern light and shared what we had learned. There were 3 major cities, always 3. No matter which map we looked at, trade routes connected them like veins, keeping the world moving. Kingdoms existed between them, shaped by those connections, and beyond that, very little, either unknown or deliberately left unwritten. One place stood out to me, a mountain stronghold, mentioned less often but always with weight, known for its forges, its metal, and its craftsmen. I found myself looking at it longer than I meant to. "You're thinking about it," he said. "Maybe. Dwarven city? Seems likely." He smiled slightly. "Yeah, I figured." But no matter how much we learned, something was missing. Every night in the tavern we listened. Not obviously, not actively. Just enough. To conversations, to passing remarks, to anything that might stand out. We listened for something wrong, something out of place, but nothing came. Until the 5th night. Not from someone else, but from him. "What if they're already here?" "What do you mean?" "Well, what if they came before us? But not at the same time, but earlier." The idea seemed unlikely, but in a strange way settled between us slowly. Uncomfortable and possible. If that's true, then they've had time to change things. Neither of us liked that idea. The village stayed calm, predictable, and safe. But something about it fell off. Not wrong, just something untouched. Like the world beyond it was something people didn't talk about. One day, while working near the forest edge, I noticed something strange. The ground was darker there, as if it had burned long ago, but nothing grew from it. No grass, no flowers, just empty soil. When I pointed it out, the man I was working with avoided looking at it. Old fire," he said quickly before changing the subject. I didn't push, but I didn't forget either. That night I mentioned it to Jonas. "That doesn't sound right." "Yeah, there's something strange going on." We sat in silence for a moment before he added, "What if this world isn't as clean as it looks?" I didn't answer, because I had already been thinking the same thing. We stayed for 7 days, long enough to rest, to learn, long enough to understand one thing clearly. We couldn't stay. Not because Hearth Hollow was bad, but because it wasn't why we were here. We weren't reborn to settle. We were reborn to find each other. And if the others had come before us, then standing still was the worst thing we could do. On the 7th morning, we packed what little we had. Tools, simple weapon, things we had earned, not been given. We stood at the edge of the road. Behind us, smoke rose from chimneys. Voices carried faintly through the morning air. Life continued, just as it always had. "Still from the far west?" Jonas asked. "Always." He looked ahead toward the road stretching into the distance. "Do you think they're out there?" This time I didn't hesitate. "Definitely." Not because I knew, but because I refused to believe anything else. The road was well-worn, well-traveled. It led somewhere that mattered. One of the 3 cities we had read about. A place where answers might exist. Or where things might finally start to make sense. We stepped forward together, and this time, we didn't look back, and started our long travel to Eldren's Reach.